These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and sunshine patriot will, in these times of crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of every man and woman. Thomas Paine, from The Crisis, 1776.
Absolutely becomes that all you have is hammers and everything you find is nails, and you're going to crush it. You're going to crush every nail that you find, and we're crushing the Iraqi people with the training we're giving and the unsupportive nature that's around us in the military.
Hi, this is Anthony Arnove. I'm here with Dar Jamail. Dar, we're at the Winter Soldier hearings in Washington, D.C. What have been some of the highlights for you of attending this gathering?
It's really been profound for me, actually, to hear, after so many years reporting on Iraq from strictly the Iraqi side of the story, of what the occupation has caused in their lives and what it's like living under U.S. occupation, to actually now hear the stories from the soldiers themselves. This is what we did, this is why we did it. So many of them apologizing to the Iraqi people.
I want to apologize to all the people in Iraq. And
I want to take this time to apologize to the Iraqi people.
And that until people hear about what is going on with this war, it will continue to happen and people will continue to die. I am sorry for the things that I did. I am no longer the monster that I once was.
The Iraq Veterans Against the War Winter Soldier is so critical because we have the soldiers themselves talking about, really, even there's been people on panels ridiculing what Bush said, and so different times, one soldier throwing his medals on the ground and saying, "I will not be a tool of this administration anymore." Another one today tearing up a certificate he was given by General Petraeus.
General Petraeus, you pinned this on me in Babylon in 2003 following the October 16th incident. I will no longer be a puppet for your personal gain and for your political career.
The soldiers themselves are so outraged by this propaganda.
The rules of engagement have been broadly defined and loosely enforced to protect U.S. service members at the expense of the Iraqi people. And anyone who tells you different is either a liar or a fool. When we first crossed the Kuwait-Iraq border at Az-Zubair in March 2003, we were operating under Geneva Convention guidelines and were authorized to shoot anyone wearing a military uniform except for medical and religious personnel unless they had surrendered. By the time we got to Baghdad, however, I was explicitly told by my chain of command that I could shoot anyone who came closer to me than I felt comfortable with if that person did not immediately move when I ordered them to do so, keeping in mind I don't speak Arabic. My commander told me that our mission was, and I quote, "to kill those who need to be killed and save those who need to be saved." And that was it.
During both tours of Iraq, it seemed like we raided countless residences. I couldn't even begin to give you a figure. Most of the time, we'd show up like 3 o'clock in the morning, early hours of the morning, bust in the house, raid the house, systematically clear every room, pointing semi-automatic and automatic weapons in their faces and screaming at them in a language that they don't understand. I don't know where the intelligence was coming from for this stuff, but we barely ever found anything in these houses. A lot of times they're just homes of families, and we throw everyone out on the front, out of their own homes in the front yard.
Excuse me, did I hear that right? Fire on all taxi cabs? The Lieutenant Colonel replied back, like, "You heard me, trooper, fire on all taxi cabs."
People doubt that the Iraq Veterans Against the War have credibility.
It seems to me that they would have more credibility than these armchair generals who have never served, who send people into war, who lie about the cause of war, and who then do not have to directly bear the consequences of the war in the way the soldiers and their families have.
I think that between 12 and 15 people need to testify before Henry Waxman's committee or some other committee to investigate a number of issues regarding the war.
The average American at this point thinks that only 3,000 U.S. soldiers have died in Iraq. They don't know what's happening in Iraq. But we also don't know unless we are listening and watching Democracy Now!
For 1 week, on all of the networks, show the truth. Show the babies dead on the ground, show the women with their legs blown off by cluster bombs, show the soldiers dead and dying. For 1 week, Americans would say no. That war is not the answer to conflict in the 21st century. Democracy Now!
From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Why don't you tell your story? This is amazing. He's active duty in Iraq and he called into the show. But as a producer, you'd appreciate that they called you like 3 times, didn't answer. This was a big moment for us that an active duty soldier was saying to his country, pull out.
It was...
Couldn't get you. The show is on.
It was that I was actually getting investigated and questioned that day. So my commander has me in her office. She's asking me questions, and my phone is ringing in my, because our uniforms have sleeve pockets. My phone is in there ringing, and then I was like, damn. I'm like, of all the horrible timing, because you never know when you're going to be investigated.
It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
We're going live. So how does it feel to be here now?
Having like sat in there and listened to everything, it's just filled me with like this sense of pride.
I think that the more that I've heard, the urgency for me becomes more great. When I see the pictures of now 1 million Iraqis who have been exterminated, literally because of our tax dollars, 1 million people in a 5-year span, then I recognize that we must do something about that.
I find myself being much more restless than I once was. I find myself finding things to occupy my time so that I don't have to think about Iraq. And even though it's kind of funny because I'm an activist and I speak out about it, so I have to engage with this stuff. But when I'm speaking out, it's sort of my own therapy. When I'm speaking out, it's the one thing that assuages my guilt that I have over the things that we did in Iraq.
During the deployment shortly after, my unit lost dozens of Marines for failing random drug tests, over half a dozen from my platoon alone.
The fact that we're at a gathering with so many Iraq War veterans and none of them appear to have encountered al-Qaeda in Iraq isn't surprising at all. I think it would be surprising to a lot of Americans because what we've been programmed to think is that al-Qaeda somehow has a stronghold in Iraq. I mean, the U.S. military and the occupation is like flypaper for al-Qaeda.
It's this powerful presence that leads them to a policy of pacification, the kind of policy we've been hearing about all day that leads them to order our troops to perform a version of state terrorism on the people in Iraq and Afghanistan. And of course, in the case of McCain, you know, he's willing to put the 100 years on it.
The fact is that Barack Obama is going to keep, as is Hillary Clinton, the U.S. Embassy in place. It's the largest embassy in world history, 500 CIA operatives, 100 acres of land. I mean, just a massive abomination.
The document even commented on the probability of overwhelming resistance in the United States to such an aggressive use of the military for offensive wars, noting ominously that public approval could not be obtained without, and this is their statement, quote, some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor, which of course they got at 9/11.
We're just here as like uncles and aunts helping this nascent organization, Iraq Vets Against the War. This organization is not only going to rock America, it's going to rock the world.
People in the West ask me why it's like that, and I say it's cause I got the right to fight back. Used to be a big believer in diplomacy, till I was staring down the barrel of your goals for me.
Initial invasion, because I was in Baghdad,
On the day that Baghdad fell, in April 9th of 2003, people were saying Baghdad fell in 21 days. But many Iraqis and people who were living in Iraq, like myself, were saying Baghdad fell in 13 years. We were living under sanctions and bombings and continuous foreign intervention for 13 years. So when we speak about the US intervention in Iraq, I think we should look at it on the bigger picture. Iraqi casualties, because usually the Iraqi side has this number, more or less. Now we stand on, it's between 100,000 and 1 million. No one knows how much the number is. My personal experience taught me that you can never put a human face on casualties. Each one of these casualties, they need years and years and years of description to speak about their life and the loss that their loved ones are living. You can't put the noise of explosions in the casualties list. You can't put the voice of moms crying on casualties lists. You can't put the faces of children who are missing their parents on casualties lists.
The intention of the war to be about oil. We are in a situation where 5 oil companies, Exxon, Chevron, BP, Shell, and Total, have just signed, within the last week, contracts to get oil to go into Iraq. Anyone with any sense of Iraqi history recognizes the names of these companies. These are the exact same companies that from the end of World War II until 1970 owned all of Iraq's oil. They owned it, and they controlled Iraq's fate because of owning the oil. Since they were kicked out in the early 1970s, they've been trying to get back in. This is the second or third and maybe the largest pot of oil in the world, depending on who's counting. This oil is sitting there like a gleaming prize at the end of the finishing line. And believe me, they have been planning and plotting to get it. These 5 contracts are the tip of the iceberg. The intent is to get the Iraqis to pass a law that would put everything back the way it was in the 20s. And that the most important thing is for the occupation to end, and all of the occupation to end, all of the contractors to leave, all of the companies to leave, all of the soldiers to leave, so that Iraqis can pick up the pieces for themselves. Thank you all very, very much.
We have become a dangerous group of people, not because of our military training, but because we have dared to challenge the official story. Because as members of the military, we have dared to share our experiences. Because we have dared to think for ourselves. Because we have dared to analyze and be critical. Because we have dared to follow our conscience. Because we have dared to go beyond patriotism to embrace humanity. As IVAW's longtime friend and advisor Stan Goff once said, we are still soldiers. We're just not their soldiers anymore. We are your new winter soldiers. Thank you. Thank you.
Nigga, fuck the president's speeches. I'm baptized by America and covered in leeches. The dirty water that bleaches your soul and your facial features, drowning you with propaganda that they spit through the speakers. And if you speak about the evil that the government does, the Patriot Act to track you to the type of your blood. They try to frame you and say you was trying to sell drugs and throw a federal indictment on niggas to show you love. This shit is run by fake Christians.